And welcome to another episode of the King of Queens podcast, part of No Network, because we are independent, baby. I'm Adam Danker, and with me, is Brian Wasaki, all the way from Poland. And Brian, this is the fifth
Morning, guys.
episode we've done together.
I know, and we started the first week of baseball season, so we had a little break, but it's exciting to get back on
we
when the Met season's over.
well,
So
if so, I actually had, believe it or not, now that we're starting to get some sort of audience due to YouTube. I actually had someone, believe it or not, reach out to us on our Instagram account. And they said, really enjoyed the show. Thought you guys died in Miami. So for those who are joining us for the first time, yeah, like as Brian said, we started kind of doing this loosely back in like May. So basically baseball season just started, and then Brian had his bachelor party in Miami, and things kind of like it's like we almost didn't recover for a while after that. But here we're back. We're talking on today's show about Major League Baseball playoffs. I know, even though the Mets are not in it, we are still discussing.
it's a tradition. It's an October tradition. The
It
Mets not
is.
being.
We went from meaningful games in April to talking about the playoffs still. So yeah, we're talking about teams that we root for because that's all we have left until the off season and free agency rolls around. Which, by the way, will be another topic later on in this episode. We'll be talking about our top picks for free agency or our free agency wish list. But first, I just want to remind you guys, please go ahead and subscribe to the YouTube channel as well as on our social media pages on Twitter at NYKingsOQueens. That's NYKings the letter O, Queens, and Instagram, Kings of Queens Pod. Please go ahead and follow that, and you will find some sort of segue to our social media pages as well. So, yeah, Brian, listen, at least for me, I feel like I'm the stereotypical Mets fan where at this point, obviously the Cardinals didn't get the job done. They lost to the Phillies 2-0 in the wild card series. Obviously, we went home. We're playing golf right now. And I feel like a lot of Met fans, it was an easy decision at that point. Let's root for the Dodgers to beat the Padres, and then either hope that these two teams between the Braves and the Phillies all get COVID and they just cancel the series, or you just have the Dodgers play the winner of that, and of course the Braves lost, and now it's Phillies Padres, and the Dodgers didn't show up. But I was rooting hard. I was telling a friend of mine, another Met fan, I said if the Dodgers win this series against the Padres, I will buy a Dodgers hat and a Dodgers shirt. And I mean, I feel like the Dodgers fans are almost kind of like in that higher echelon of Mets fan hoodum because, they have high expectations like we do every year, and they almost pretty much blow it in their own Dodgery way. But I wanted to get, because it seems like you always stray away from the norm, Bri. Like, where were you with rooting? Were you just looking for like the Dodgers to take it like I was and probably some Met fans, or are you looking more towards the American League?
So I was actually the polar opposite to you, Adam. I was actually rooting for the Padres. I really can't stand the Dodgers. And I think it's kind. I think Evan brought it up on his last Rico Baronia podcast. Like he was rooting, like people rooting against the Padres because the Mets beat them. And I always flipped it the other way. I'm like, we should root for the team that the Mets lost to, because if the Padres win the World Series, you could be like, at least we lost to the World Series champions.
Yeah.
Man, they were the team of destiny. Maybe that was just meant to happen, right? They knocked off the 101 win Mets, 111 win Dodgers.
Yeah.
And if the Dodgers don't fire Dave Roberts, something's wrong, man.
They're not. They've already. I'm gonna stop you right there. They already announced that they're bringing them back.
I mean, there's something, dude. There's something. The only World Series they won was the BS World Series in 2020 shortened season. Besides that, it's you're right. It's kind of October. Like the Dodgers find their own way to fail, right?
Yeah.
And it's kind of remarkable, given the team they had. But I was rooting for the Padres, and in the American League, I'm still rooting for Houston. I love their shithousery. I love that everyone hates them. I love the fact that everyone hates them, and that just makes me love them more. And they've lost Springer, they've lost L2, they've lost Correa, and they're still an unstoppable machine, right? They're
Yeah.
just the machine that just keeps on going. So I'm rooting for them. I'm rooting for Verlander getting a ring.
Well,
Just
here's
shout out to his wifey. What's her name again?
come on, try to
Uh,
keep it a classy
Bro,
podcast.
what's her name? Oh
Kate
God,
Upton.
get Upton. Oh
Uh,
yeah,
come on,
holla,
man.
holla, holla.
Like you weren't in college at 2011. So really, like it's funny. Like now, I'm just rooting hardcore for the Astros because here's my reasoning, and maybe I'm crazy. I mean, yeah, I get the whole going back to what you said and what Evan Roberts said on his podcast. You're rooting for basically the team that beat you,
But Evan
and
was disagreeing with me. He was saying people would root against the Padres because they beat the Mets. So I'm countering Evan and saying I'm actually rooting for the team that beat the Mets.
I mean, I'm normally in the same boat with that respect in terms of rooting for the team that beat you, just because they deserved, unless it came out months from now that Joe Musgrove had some weird substance on his ears after all. But my thing is like I normally root for the teams that beat the Mets. When they lost in the wild card to the Giants in 2016, that was the team I was kind of hoping that would kind of make the run again. But my thing about this Padres team, and for the most part, I love this roster. Obviously the name that is not there is Fernando Tatis, which he I think if the Padres win the World Series, by the way, I'll just come out and say it. If they win the World Series, he doesn't deserve to get a ring because if Major League Baseball is not going to put Barry Bonds on the Hall of Fame based on the fact that he may or may not have taken steroids, which let's all admit he did, but it was a part of the game back then don't don't contradict that notion by giving this guy a ring when he was blatantly suspended for using it and then incredibly lied to like Roger Clemens levels of ignorance about the whole thing. But my thing about this is just like Manny Machado. Like he is probably one of the most unlikable players in baseball. I mean, then again, if the tables were turned and Francisco Lindor was just acting like a jerk off the entire time as well, I mean, we would love every second of it, Brian. But I don't know. I just with Manny Machado and just everything that all the controversy that's kind of surrounded him throughout his career, I'm just turned off by the Padres right now. But I love the Astros, and yeah, they don't have Correa anymore. They don't have Springer, but you know, even though they got popped for cheating a couple years ago, and they're still hated by a lot of fan bases, I
It
just
was
think
against
like
it was against the Yankees, so it doesn't count. So it's
yeah, I mean it
actually
doesn't.
I
At least the Met fans, it doesn't count. I mean, they played that was the Dodgers World Series, right?
think
That
so.
they won. They ended up winning, if I'm not
Yep.
mistaken.
Yep.
But my thing is like I don't know this Astros team. I got a chance to watch them a lot with the Mariners. They're scrappy, man. They really are. They're a scrappy bunch of guys. It's not like everyone's hitting home runs every other at bat here. I mean, they're stringing hits together. Their pitchers are coming up in clutch spots. Um, you know, I'm starting to really, really like Alex Bregman again. He's putting, he may not always get a hit, but he's really putting together a lot of very good at bats, and that's the kind of thing that wins you championships. So, you know, is it ideal for that we're kind of backed into this corner of rooting for the Astros? No, I would love to root for the Guardians, but I just feel like if the Guardians go to the World Series, I just can't see them beating the Phillies or the Padres. I feel like the Phillies are that kind of that honey badger team that we saw out of the Royals in the mid 2000s, where they get to the World Series and yeah, they lost to the Giants, but then that kind of team that we saw beat the Mets in 15 after getting backed into a corner a couple of times and just getting hot. That's the kind of team where I mean I think we could all agree as Met fans you don't want to see Philly win the World Series at this point.
No, and but knowing the Mets, the Phillies are going to win the World Series, right? So the Nats won the Nats won in 19, the Braves won, the Phillies won, and it's just cascading against the Mets, right? So it's going to be an amazing, epic season, 100-win season. The Mets won 14 out of the 19 games against the Phillies, and yet the Phillies are still going to win the World Series. Being a Mets fan, I just you just know that's how it's going to go. But also, I think the biggest thing we're missing from the Padres is if they do win the World Series, Robinson Cano would get a ring. So well deserved, Robbie. That's why we're pulling for you, pulling for those Padres. You deserve
for
that
for the
ring.
5 minutes that he played for
Yeah,
that team. Yeah.
it's more than Tatis. So there you go. so
I don't know.
so Cano's a bigger contributor to the Padres' success
Where's your
than
view on
Tatis.
that, Bri? Like, because I feel like that's a weird thing. Because I saw that going around. I think MLB.com actually
Yeah,
posted that it was if the it was if the Mets, the Braves, or the Padres won the World
Padres.
Series,
Yeah,
he would have got a ring. Like,
I
do you think that needs to be? Well, I heard somewhere that apparently the players on the team have to vote on it, so they're it's not a guarantee
Yeah,
thing.
yeah, yeah. So I assumed it was always up to the team and ownership who they would want
Yeah.
to give rings to. uh, but yeah, I think that's kind of stupid that Robinson Cano, who actually had like a negative war on Padres and the Braves, would be and the Mets would be giving a ring. So I yeah, that is kind of weird. But Robbie deserves it. If anyone deserves a break in baseball, it's Robinson Cano.
Is it? Is it Robin Cano? Are you sure
Very
about
so very
that?
sarcastically, yes.
But yeah, I mean, so besides the Mets getting bounced in the first round, which by the way, we failed to mention, if they just would have won the division, they would have gotten a shot at the Phillies.
Yeah.
A favorable matchup there. But where do you rank this playoff? I don't know how much you've seen of it thus far, but where do you rank these playoffs thus far if you have to grade them?
Uh, for me, being in Poland 6 hours, the games usually start at 2 a.m. my time, so I'm usually in bed. But I usually catch the highlights. From what I saw from the Astros Mariners series, that seemed like an epic series, right? 18 innings,
Yeah.
game three. That series could have literally gone any other way. The
Yeah.
Mariners, but like we talked about, the Astros are just scrappy, man. They just get the job done. They just know how to win. So. That's been good. Again, the Phillies, Braves, and before we even get to that, I think we got to even talk about how these bye teams, right? The Dodgers and the Braves got embarrassed, right?
Yeah.
And those 5 days off, baseball is such a game of just like rhythm and just like day to day, right? That's why it's a day to day game, right? Because
Yeah.
right, and just having 5 days off, sure, it might rest the pitchers, might give some guys who have some knocks, but guys lose their timing, right? And the Braves and the Dodgers got embarrassed, really, and obviously good for a Mets fan that the Braves, but again, they lost to the Phillies, so. Um, but I'm looking for the Guardians to win Game 5. They have
Yeah.
to. They have to. Just for
Well,
the sake of the world, sake of the world.
I think that the Guardians, I think they have a very good chance. Obviously Yankee fans might disagree with you, and Flash, might have to say like 27 a couple of times within the span of that conversation. But I just feel like the Guardians are just that kind of team that you could see. I was able to catch most of this series except for the last game, which I fell asleep during that. I believe the game was tied, and then I woke up and found out the Yankees survived. But it's one of those things. I just feel like, and they've actually said this on in a certain way. If by the way, if you're watching the games, you know well by now that Ron Darling's been on the play-by-play color commentary along Bob Costas, who just doesn't seem to shut up. And Ron Darling made a good point the other night, saying that really this Yankee team has really struggled outside of Judge, and that's kind of been the theme for this Yankee team all year, which is kind of amazing that they are where they are, considering we always talk every year about a team like the Yankees who just kind of gets into the playoffs and somehow accidentally falls into winning the division, and then they run into a hot team such as Cleveland, and obviously it always never really works out. But I mean, the Judge hit a home run the other night that I don't think has landed yet, and I just feel like if this this Guardians team, if they could just get by Aaron Judge and Harrison Bader, who by the way had a phenomenal game the other night.
Legend. Yeah.
Yeah, by the way, Westchester boy. So
Yeah.
yeah, went to Horace Mann. So yeah, if if they could just do what they did to get here during the regular season, which was pitch well and play small ball, which is really the reason why they're still in this series. I've never seen so many infield hits in a playoff series in my life, Brian. But if they could just do that, they'll be fine, and it'll frustrate the Yankees. And I was really looking forward to tonight and the Yankees kind of got bailed out because it was said the news did break before the game that Garrett Cole told Aaron Boone before the game that he was going to be made available, and I would have loved for nothing more than for Aaron Boone to legitimately fall into that trap, bring him into a tough spot in the 7th or 6th, and just Garrett Cole blow up, and the doors on this game are blown wide open, and we're waltzing into the 9th inning of this game with the Guardians up with like a 4-run lead. But obviously, the baseball gods favor the Yankees right now. But yeah, man, I mean, I just feel like this whole bye week thing obviously hasn't worked, and I love that it's blown up in the faces of Major League Baseball, who obviously did this whole system to favor the top teams, and now look where they are. They're looking at the potential for a Cleveland Guardians, Philadelphia
Padres.
Phillies
Yeah.
Padres World Series, where it's like, unless you're a fan of these teams, you're probably not going to watch every single pitch of this series. But yeah, I mean, listen, if I had to grade this playoffs, I would say it's probably a C. But you know what?
It's better grades than you were usually pulling, so
That is true. That is true. That is true.
But
Uh,
so Adam, but the whole thing is like they just want more teams in the playoffs, right? So what's the solution here, right? So you gotta. Everyone wants, okay, so now it shouldn't be a 3-game wild card series; it should be a 5-game. And how long are we doing October for, right? The more teams in it, the less important it is, right? It was important that you made October, and the more teams they put into October, it loses it. So
yeah,
for me, all these changes are for me. Like, I'm always a baseball purist. I still don't like the DL, the designated hitter in the National League. Let the pitchers hit. So the more changes that they have to this game, it just loses. It just loses what baseball is to me.
yeah, I totally get that. I mean, I've just kind of gotten over the whole DH thing, but yeah, I mean, it's a weird situation because yeah, I hate the fact that yeah, you're right. The playoffs are synonymous with the month of October, and that's the way it should be. And the fact that we're talking about the World Series being in November is just like it's
Yeah.
strange.
Yeah.
Obviously 2001 was kind of a different occurrence because of 9/11, so that's understandable. But I'm going to actually take it, since you are in Europe, I'm going to take it a little bit of a European route. I thought the COVID playoffs would have been a phenomenal chance for Major League Baseball to try out a new format. And I think what they should have done, since they were kind of doing this, if I remember correctly, at neutral sites, just first round of the playoffs, regardless of what seed you are, do round robin. See where that takes you. I know, obviously, that's not feasible now because you're talking about possibly putting teams against each other that are on opposite sides of the country, but maybe do that in a way. I think Major League Baseball would. I think eventually we'll. I'm talking like 50 years from now, we'll be down that route where I say round robin, first round, top 4 teams from each pool make it through, and then you play best of 7 or whatever. And then you know what? The World Series is played at the Field of Dreams Stadium.
I dig it. Or the the Sandlot set.
Yeah, no, it's just a baseball field that was built outside of James Earl Jones's house. All right, so switching gears here. Obviously the next thing that Met fans get to look forward to is the free agent market. And I was talking with some other people, and I think you and I had a conversation about it as well, where really the Mets they're not going to have to make a lot of hard decisions during the free agent period because let's face it, other than Judge and maybe a couple other names here and there, it's not really a luxurious free agent market out there this year. Really, the big moves are going to be made in trades. So, excuse me. And
Classic.
so, basically, there's going to be a lot of trades. I think the big one, obviously, is going to be Otani, but and I read an article today that it's really going to be dependent on what the Mets decide to do about Judge. My thing about this, and I'm curious to hear what you have to say, and obviously people who are watching this, please go ahead, drop a comment below. How much is Aaron Judge worth to you? We really want to hear back from you. And then maybe we'll post some of the comments on the social media pages as well. My thing is with Judge is that he's 30. He gets hurt a lot. He is a very good outfielder. There's no doubt about that. He's obviously one of the best hitters in baseball. Just came off one of the best seasons in Major League Baseball history. Almost won the Triple Crown, Brian, with 62 home runs, which is like insane. But my thing is like, I see, and maybe this is just PTSD. I see like Jason Bay type seasons if the Mets were to sign this guy, like probably within a season or two. He might miss a couple of games here and there in his first initial season. Now, this is all hypothetical. Steve Cohen did joke during the regular season that he was just going to bump the number up as high as possible just to get the Yankees to overpay him, which would be phenomenal if he actually follows through with that. And if that's the reason, if he's like, he's calling Judge, he's like, listen, we'll give you $700 million, but make sure you tell the Yankees first. I mean, at this point, really, like, if Judge, there's a lot of talk that he's going to sign with the Giants or somewhere out west where he's from. But I feel like if you're the Yankees, you're almost shamed into giving this guy literally whatever he wants. But for the Mets, if you're the Mets GM, Brian, and then we'll go down some of the other names that are available out there, as well as maybe some possible moves. If you're the GM of the Mets, how much? And I think we had this conversation on the last episode too. How much are you offering in the first phone call to Aaron Judge?
So I think even before, just this morning when I was scrolling through Twitter, there was a report that Cohen told Epler, we're spending big again. So, that might be signals to the Yankees and all of baseball that, Uncle Stevie's ready to open the checkbook for Aaron Judge. But, I also had this talk with my dad, and he said, the Mets and Yankees kind of have like a unspoken truth, right? That, kind of don't go after my big free agents, there's some cordiality between them. But I think Stevie doesn't give a shit. I think Stevie's going to go big. And I think, what is Judge going to make, right? 50? Is he 50 million per player, $50 million per year? 10
but
years.
How much remember, he's 30 years old.
Yeah.
You're giving this guy, 10 years?
I mean, that's what he's at least going for. He's at least going for,
I don't know.
Or you do like a 10-year deal with an opt-out after like year 3. So then he's still like a $33 million. He's 33 years old, and he could still make another big payday. But I don't know, dude. It's hard, right? Aaron Judge, we agree. He's a great player. He's always hurt, right? He's always hurt. He's just such a big guy that he just looks fragile, but he's amazing, right? But again, I don't know. Again, I'm stumped, like, because there's this, because you want him on the team, you want to get him off the Yankees, right? Every team would love an Aaron Judge. Imagine him and Alonso back to back on each other.
Well, I was talking to someone about this the other day. I said, chances of him playing the outfield, let alone center field, in 3 years, I think are very slim. I think the smart move would to be, even if it's not immediate, work with him at first base and on Pete's days off, you have him, work out at first. Obviously, if it doesn't work out, you could just switch him to the outfield in the middle of the game. Um, I mean, my opinion about the whole Judge thing, and maybe some people might think I'm being a little cheap here with a big purse. I would say you give him 5 years with an option for 6. You give him about $50 million and a shit ton of incentives. And if you say like, hey, you hit 50 home runs or whatever this year, and or whatever over 100 RBIs, bat 300, we'll give you X, Y, and Z amount of dollars. And I think like that's the way to go with this guy. I think like short term contract, but crap ton of money front loaded and with incentives. I mean, I feel like if you're Aaron Judge, yeah, you're gonna get the stupid money from like a San Francisco, like a Yankees. I wouldn't be surprised if we're sitting here uh, around the winter meetings and there's talks of him getting 700 or even 600, something around that. But I mean, it's I can't remember the last time a big time free agent with this much potential and this upside has been 30 years old with so much risk involved. It's yeah, like it's one thing, Brian, to spend money and there being no limit on the purse, but it's another one to be foolish about it. I just feel like, yeah, you're gonna have to spend money to win. That's just the way the game is, but like you can't be stupid about it.
Yeah, and I think we could even just go back to like some of the bigger contracts over the past few years, right? So remember when Machado got his big contract, like 10 years,
Yeah,
300, but he was 26, right?
right.
So he's still not even he's still basically he has a lot of years in his prime. And Corey Seager last year, 10 years, 325, and he's 27, so I guess 28, 29.
Yeah.
But again, that's such a stupid number for Corey Seager. And like, there's no doubt in my mind that it's 8+ for Judge. I don't care how front loaded it is. It's 8+, and some team's going to give it to him. The Yankees are going to give it to him. You can't be the Yankees and lose Judge. You can't. Just
Yeah.
imagine the fan base if he does leave the Yankees. What are Yankee fans going to say about their team that they can't? The Yankees, who we always had talks about Adam, right? Just win us World Series, just throw money, and they can't even afford to pay Judge anymore. We understand it's stupid money, but it's the Yankees, right? So going back into it, I still think that he doesn't leave the Yankees because the Yankees can't afford to lose him.
Yeah, I think that would be a PR nightmare. I think at that point, for
And
them, but
imagine he actually goes to the Mets. Imagine the PR nightmare of that.
uh,
That it wasn't about going home. He literally just went to another borough because Uncle Stevie just bid more than the Yankees.
listen, I wouldn't be too wild about it if he did end up signing with the Mets for an insane number. But to be honest, after the back and forth between him and the Yankees with contracts and all that stuff this year with the money, I would be surprised if it happened. I really wouldn't. I wouldn't like I feel like if we're prioritizing what ifs 1 through 3 between him leaving, going anywhere else but New York, going to the Mets or going to the Yankees, I think it's in that order. I think it's one and literally anywhere else but New York, 2 the Mets, and 3 the Yankees. I think the only way Judge stays, and then we'll move on to some other names and maybe possible moves. I think the only way he stays is if they win the World Series. So yeah, I mean we'll stay tuned for that, obviously. But what are some other names? Or obviously there's a lot of things that need to be addressed about this team. Uh, Lefty hitting, pitching, lefty pitching, most notably, because they literally had nobody this year at certain times.
What's wrong with Joelly?
I love Joely Rodriguez. Don't get me wrong, I really do. There was moments where, there was a lot of moments though where he didn't really pitch in meaningful situations, and there was a lot of times where he was thrown into meaningful situations, and whether or not he showed it through his performance, you could just see in the body language he was just like, I just want to pitch with a 7-run lead in Arizona instead of this crap. Like I I love Joely Rodriguez. I think that though Buck had him on a very short leash this year. Um, I think that they very much underestimated how much other people were going to go hard after Hader. Obviously, the Padres got him, but yeah, I think lefty. But then again, Brian, if you look at it, who's out there? Who's out there that is worth the? Because the one name, and it was kind of a move where yes, the Mets are in better hands now, but this is still a stereotypical move where it's. I would not be shocked. I would say probably 90% sure this is going to backfire on them. I would not be shocked if we're sitting here in March with spring training and discussing the fact that Aroldis Chapman is going to be in a Mets uniform because he basically told the Yankees to go fuck themselves the other day by not showing up to a team workout during the playoffs. So, and he was left off the roster for this series, so he's pretty much checked out at this point. So I mean, would you be shocked at all if Chapman is with the Mets come March? I mean, I that in hypotheticals, that's a great move, but I mean, he's more injury prone than Judges.
I mean, are you looking as Chapman as your closer and
No,
losing
as a setup
Diaz?
guy, absolutely. I mean, you would be stupid because, I mean, and also to kind of chime in real quick about Diaz, I mean, he has stated very much that he wants to get a deal done as soon as possible. He doesn't even want to go, and which tells me that, obviously he wants to stay here. So which is good. So the Mets, all they need to do is just give him the right numbers or meet him somewhere with the right numbers. But yeah, I mean, with Chapman, if I would
No,
look at him more as
no,
competing for the
no.
setup role.
He's washed. He's
You think
washed.
so?
He's done. He's done. He's done.
Not even for a middle relief kind of
No,
guy.
no, no, no. And why would you even want a headache like that on your team, right?
I mean,
Like,
obviously, you're bringing him in after the conversation about being had, saying you're going to come in, you're going to pitch, you're going to do what you're told, and that's it.
I could I could see him going to a team like Tampa, who's just looking for because I really think dude, look at Chapman's stats this year. He pitched to almost a 4.5 ERA. His WHIP was almost 1.5. He's erratic. He's injured a lot, and his best days are ahead of him. Unless you're literally giving him a veteran's minimum, and you're just like, all right, prove yourself. Otherwise, I'm not touching him. I'm not
I
touching
think
him.
I'm calling it now because this is a move that screams them all over. I'm calling Chapman to be in Toronto next season. They're just desperate after the ass whooping they got from Seattle. But I think going back to prospective moves, I think Judge is going to be the talk, obviously, of moves and people to be made. Otani, like I said before, that's a name that's been brought up all year. But the name that I feel like is not getting enough press, and I
You
think
say your
that
boy Trey Turner?
yeah, yeah, man. Listen, he could play. Imagine that kind of speed at the top of the lineup. Like, because let's face it, is Brandon Nimmo coming back? I would say the chances are probably, I would probably say 40% chance that he comes back. And this is his first free agency period. So he's probably going to go after the dollars, which, listen, I am all for players chasing the money, but he's 100% going to regret leaving New York if he does. But Trey Turner, think about it, can play center field. If Lindor is out with an injury, can play shortstop. I mean, the guy is as reliable as one could be. And,
Yeah,
and
yeah, and so he played 45 games in center. I remember. Remember with who was playing shortstop that on the Nationals that he was in center field? Remember?
I have no idea, to be honest. Because that's how memorable that Nationals team
Yeah,
was.
right.
Uh, um, you know what? Yeah, I mean, you know what? Look that up while I babble for a
Yeah, yeah,
moment.
yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, I just feel like it's one of those things where the Mets are transitioning, which I love, and you and I, for as long as we know,
Danny Espinosa.
there we go.
That's it.
So
That's who was playing
that's
shortstop.
how significant he was and memorable he was to that team. But actually he went on and chased money after that in Colorado.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, the Mets are in this transition period, which you and I, since we've known each other, Brian, we've always spoken about like Mets, whatever moves they make, whoever they bring in, they're always one dimensional. You never, very rare have we seen past GMs and the Wilpons as well, bringing in guys who could do more than just play their position, hit, or whatever, their specific talent is that they're here. It's very, now we have guys that could play outfield that,
Like
even Brett
McNeil. Yeah.
Baty, yeah, like Brett Baty, who is one of the top prospects in baseball, who's going to be our starting third baseman for years to come. If the Mets make a big time move where somehow they get a third baseman in a trade as a throw in, for example, if for whatever reason they find themselves in a situation in the offseason where they get a Corey Seager, like you wrote up before, or they get a Matt Chapman because Toronto has realized their chances of making it far in the playoffs are not that good. Um, you could throw Brett Baty if need be in the outfield. He could play left field. So you have that flexibility, and especially with the DH now. And but I really think that the move, other than Trey Turner, because I love Trey Turner. You already know I'm fanboying for him. Is catcher. I mean, we spoke about it on the last episode. The Mets, and I talk about it every single time we bring it up. The Mets have not had a stable catcher in their lineup since Paul LaDuca. This is 2006-07 we're talking now. And, now and then a smattering of names, which include Travis d'Arnaud, which, listen, if you like them or not, he was not reliable. He was not the guy. The Mets really need, and hopefully it's Alvarez, but you can never
Yeah.
bank. The guy has had maybe a sip of coffee, not even a cup of coffee, a sip of coffee in the
Yep.
majors. We can't base our entire future on a guy who has really, yeah, he's great in the minors, but we have no idea what he's going to be like over the course of a season. The Mets need a Yadier Molina guy, a guy who could anchor that position for the next 15 years. And I wouldn't have a problem if they go out and get someone in free agency, because I feel like if you try and trade for a catcher anywhere else, you're going to give up way more than you need to. But um, other than that, are there any positions that you think, I mean, we spoke about it, I think, on the last episode. I think everybody except maybe for a handful of guys are pretty much, you're gone, or, you're taking less money at this
Yeah.
point. But I
Well,
mean, who's out there
so
that catches your eye?
yeah, so there's actually one player that I was going through the list of free agents that I really just think could be a difference maker on this team, and that's Jose Abreu as a right-handed DH. I know Abreu's getting up there in age, 36, 37, but just look at his previous year. He still had a really good year, and he's just. And are we really banking on this? Are we really banking on this DH platoon thing with Vogelbach again and another right, or do they actually need a legit DH who smashes righties, lefties, plays every day? Because Vogelbach,
Yeah,
cool is cool, but he's a depth piece. He's not someone I
yeah,
want taking 400 ABs a year.
yeah,
As much as we love Vogelbach, the Mets DH was one of the worst in baseball,
yeah.
and that was definitely a downfall of of this team. They need a legit DH, and I think Jose Abreu could actually be a very good piece in the Mets lineup. Um, Bat him fifth, sixth, whatever. I think Abreu would be a good fit. And in terms of the catcher position, it's Alvarez's, right? It's his now.
Well, it's his to lose. I mean, it's
It
really,
is, it is.
yeah,
And Adam, the Mets, anytime anytime we have prospects that are well ranked, it kind of remember Fernando Martinez, those days, and but
Well, listen, there's been a shift in the prospect, man. If you look at Jimenez in Cleveland and what he's doing, remember he was a piece of that Lindor trade. I mean,
yeah, of course,
the tide is turning, man. The tide is turning
yeah.
with the prospects.
And Alvarez is most a consensus top five prospect in baseball. He's a masher. So again, it's his job to lose, right? And he's got
Yeah.
to prove that he could be the Mets catching solution. And so we're banking. We're kind of banking on young guys to pick it up, right? We're expecting Beatty to be an everyday third baseman, Alvarez, right?
Yeah.
So, for a team that's expected to compete, we're going to be putting a lot of emphasis on the younger guys.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm excited about the young talent. I mean, there's other names as well in the minors, like Ronnie Mauricio, who I am completely high on. I love this kid. The only problem is he's 6'2",
No,
165 pounds.
yeah, he's
I
he's a trade piece. He's a trade
Oh
piece.
yeah, I mean it's unfortunate because I've seen highlights of him, I've seen at bats of him, and he really is a talented player. And yeah, you're
He has
absolutely
like a
right.
280 on base percentage, Adam. He
Yeah,
did,
I mean,
he.
listen, guys who hit 20 home runs and steal 20 bags, those will win me over pretty easily. So, and he's a switch hitter too, and he can play
Yeah,
short. But I mean, he's 100% a trade piece at this point. The more I read about him, the more it looks like he's probably going to be dealt this offseason
yeah,
um, for someone bigger. But yeah, man, I mean that's the good thing though about the Mets is that as disappointing as the season as they had, disappointing of a conclusion to a season that they had. If you look at where they're headed in the right direction, where they're headed, they're in the right direction, and that's where I think that Met fans and the organization needs to look at and because we have seen this go several ways, not only with the Mets but with other franchises where you'll have franchises that hold on to guys for too long, like you said,
yeah,
Fernando Martinez, and then you have other franchises that are quick to trade other guys, and they turn out to be superstars or they blow it up too fast. And that's the thing. The Billy Epler needs to make the moves necessary, but at what cost? And I think that's what's going to be an interesting thing that we're going to have to wait and see this offseason. How much does, like we said, how much does Aaron Judge cost? How much is Trey Turner going to cost? There's other guys that were on this team this year that are going to be free agents. Chris Bassett, what is he worth now after that nightmare of an outing in Game 3? I with him just real quick, and then I guess we could end it there. With a lot of these guys, including Bassett, that are free agents, putting on your GM hat again, I think that we really shouldn't hold too much against him. I don't think Game 3 should define Bassett's year at the Mets. I think that he was one of, if not the most um, consistent player or pitcher on this team, and I don't think that I'm sure when we look back at down the road in July, at what this team might have to pay Bassett and say, I think we'll look at it and say, wow, we actually got him for cheap. But who you think is worth the money, and who do you think is coming back at least, and obviously by add or subtraction, we'll probably be able to find out who's not coming back. But yeah, who you
yeah.
bringing back and for how much?
Um, so yeah, I'm split on Bassett. I agree with you, Adam. I think he was the most consistent pitcher the Mets had this year. And it's a shame that his last two starts were his two worst starts of the year.
Yeah,
But I think before we even get to Bassett, I think you also have to bring up DeGrom, right? So Scherzer
yeah,
is going to be 39. DeGrom is going to be 35, going on 36. And Bassett's already 34. What are you going to give him? A 4-year deal? So your top three pitchers are over 38 years old?
yeah.
You know, they're just some guys that you just, have to let go. Bassett's a solid 3 starter, in my opinion. Maybe
I
a
would
2
say
on some
4.
games.
I would say
Maybe.
4, man. Yeah.
Yeah. So what are you paying a number 4 starter?
So how old did you say he was?
He's 33. He'll be 34 in February.
I would say you give him a 3-year contract with an option for a fourth.
All right.
I'm
And how
paying him
much?
20 a year.
20. Okay.
I think that's a good deal. I think that's a kind of like thank you for getting us through some of the rough parts of the season.
Mm.
Thank you for eating innings because really, I mean, the one thing he was really consistent at was eating innings, especially when this bullpen was depleted, and that was something that really, especially on some of those those long road trips, really helped this team. Um,
Or how about this? How about Taiwan Walker versus Bassett?
if I had to pick
We,
one,
yeah, I mean, I'm sure we would take Bassett, but Taiwan Walker is also a quality four starter, and he's 30
my
years old.
thing with Bassett is that you know what I mean with Walker, I liked him, but my thing is that chances are Lugo's not coming back next year, and I think Walker slides into his spot really nice in the bullpen.
I no. There's no way Walker is taking.
No, 100%. No, I'm just speaking in hypotheticals. I don't think to any degree that Walker is gonna entertain a bullpen spot to come back and
uh,
say, "Hey, we want you to
well, well,
win."
well, well. So how about this? So I will end on this one.
All right.
Um, so is Lugo gonna get a contract to be a starting pitcher, or
Oh
will
no,
he? No, you don't think,
no, not at
dude.
all.
I think one team could roll the dice on him being a starter.
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm sure like a
I'm
like
not
a
saying for the Mets. Yeah, I'm for the Mets. He's a strict bullpen guy, and for
I'm
the
sure
past,
like a Tampa or like a Miami or a team like that is not willing to spend a lot of money, but still kind of, I guess so. Tampa still kind of trying to be competitive. A guy like that, I wouldn't be shocked if I don't think if he gets a contract anywhere. I wouldn't be surprised if he goes to the Bronx either
but as a reliever or as a starting pitcher.
as a reliever, 100%. But
I
as
see.
a
See, I
starter, though, man, I don't know if there's many teams out there. That a guy that really, I mean, he's been in the league what 12 years,
who
and Lugo, right? Hasn't he been around?
6
Well, times two then. Uh,
12
no,
years.
I just feel like I don't know. I just feel like even 6 years. I mean, if a guy had any kind of makeup of or potential or hint of being a starter, I feel at least he would be getting one full season or two full seasons out of that six of being a starter. And even if he wasn't that successful, at least you have that sample sheet. But I don't think. I mean, who knows? Like I said, maybe a team like Tampa
Yeah.
who maybe they can make him a starter because they do the whole starter kind of weird thing over there where they have their closer come out in the first
Mhm.
inning, and so maybe really that would be kind of a cheat sheet kind of way for him to possibly do that. I mean, maybe even I don't know if I had to name another team, I just feel like Kansas City, a team like that, where he goes out there, he proves his worth as a starter, and then he gets dealt at the deadline to a team that needs an arm. So maybe that's an avenue for him.
Fair.
Yeah,
I still think that he always views himself as a starter, and I think there will be one team, and I think Tampa might be a good choice because
yeah,
Lugo is one of those analytic darlings. His spin rate on his curve is like unreal, and I just think like Tampa could manipulate that in some way where Lugo's like an all star. But well, dude, I'm intrigued. But I obviously with the Mets,
yeah.
Lugo is a reliever, but I still think there might be a team out there willing to throw him 2-3 years as a starter and run with it. But we'll see.
Yeah, man. I mean, I'm not very big on that analytical stuff. I mean, to me, spin rate doesn't mean anything if it's over the plate and hit 500 feet. So, you know, I well, at the end of the day, if you could throw strikes and get outs, that's all that matters to me. And I think, there's what Buck did with this team this year. I wouldn't be surprised if there's kind of a setback in the analytical stuff, because he's not the kind of guy that lets analytics rule his decisions throughout the course of a game. But yeah, we'll have to wait and see. And like we said on the last pod, we'll be doling out 2 episodes a week of the show. So please go ahead and subscribe to the podcast. Hit the thumbs up, and drop a comment below. Tell us what you think of the show. Tell us how many jerseys you want Bryan to take off next time we have a pod. If any of you have been wondering what I'm drinking, that it was indeed beer, because it is midnight here in New York. So, but yeah, we'll be back later in the week, Bryan. We're trying to do Monday and Friday for posting these episodes, but it doesn't always work out that way with the time difference and our schedules. But we'll be in the ballpark. So, yeah, all the more important to follow us on our social media pages. Post it below in the description. So, yeah, that's been it for the Kings of Queens podcast with me, Adam, and B-Rad. And stay amazing.